Salve Miki, welcome back to Viva Latina and welcome to our second declension Grammar 1 review video. I'm Soham Shah, the president and founder, and let's get started understanding the second declension. We will start out with a general overview of the second declension. First, we know that there are 5 declensions in Latin, and they are distinguished by their genitive singular endings. There are 2 sub-declensions, kind of a sub-declension in the second declension. There's the masculine part and there is the neuter part. We will address both in this video. Most masculine nouns end in us, er, or ir. Most neuter nouns end in um. So let's first look at some of the variations in the second declension masculine in the singular number. First, we have amicus, which is amicus, amici, amico, amicum, amico. So over here, let's understand that we don't necessarily have to focus on the initial part of the noun. Let's just focus on the endings. The endings are highlighted and colored in blue. So if you just look at the endings, we can see the pattern of us, o. Again, knowing your genitive singulars are extremely important because in the future, we will find a little bit of a pattern in the second declension, but there's some nouns which don't have that pattern. Now let's look at filius. This is a little different than amicus because we have the I in filius after the L. It's not the initial I, it's the second I. So a lot of students get confused in what happens with this I. What you need to understand is the pattern will still remain the same. We have the nominative to be filius, the genitive to be filii, then we have the dative to be filio, the accusative to be filium, and the ablative to be filio. Look at the macrins over here. We can see the genitive singular macronized, the dative singular macronized, and the ablative singular macronized. So understand, we see the same foundational form of us, o. Now, let's look at puer. The big difference in puer compared to the first 2 examples is that puer is not a US noun. We have an ER, but the pattern is still the same. We have puer, pueri, puero, puerum, puero. Remember, it's ER. It does not make a difference if it's US, ER, or in the future we will look at an IR noun. You need to understand the pattern is o for the genitive to ablative. Now let's look at ager. Ager, agri, agro, agrum, agro. I want to point out something extremely important over here. The genitive singular is not ageri, it is agri. We can compare this to puer, in which puer's genitive singular is not puri, but pueri. Puer carry forwards the e, but agri does not. That is why it's extremely important to know your genitive singulars, because your nominative doesn't necessarily decide how the rest of the noun is declined. It's more of a genitive thing. So if you do know your genitive singulars, you can understand how to decline the noun perfectly. That's why ager is not ageri for genitive singular, it is agri. Now let's move on to vir. We have vir, viri, viro, virum, viro. Again, we can look from genitive to ablative that the foundational pattern of o is there. However, in the nominative singular, we have ir instead of er or us. Now, let's look at the second declension plural masculine variations. We have amici, amicorum, amicis, amicos, amicis. Again, let's look at the pattern of only the letters which are bolded and in the color blue. E, orum, is, os, is. For filius, it's filii, filiorum, filiis, filios, filiis. For puer, it is pueri, puerorum, pueris, pueros, pueris. Again, let's look back at the fact that it is not puri, but pueri, because that is based on the genitive singular. For ager, it is agri, agrorum, agris, agros, agris. And for vir, it's viri, virorum, viris, viros, viris. We can see a little bit of a pattern here, but remember that the foundational form of the initial letters is always going to be based on the genitive singular. So make sure you know your genitive singulars extremely well for the second declension. Now we will cover the second declension neuter half of the topic. Let's do a quick little review over here. When we see a noun written in this form, we need to understand that the first part is the nominative singular, bellum. The next part, separated by commas, is the genitive singular, belli. Then we have n, which means neuter, which is a gender. And then we have the meaning of the noun, war. Bellum means war. Now let's look at how this noun is declined. We have bellum, belli, bello, bellum, bello, bella, bellorum, bellis, bella, bellis. Again, the makrons are kind of the same. However, we need to understand that the nominative singular is the nominative plural is a, and then the accusative plural is the same. So let's identify an important factor and an important pattern over here. The nominative and accusative in neuter, this transcends across all declensions, will always be the same as the accusative singular. Accusative singular, nominative singular will be the same form. That's what's important to know your context when you are translating, so you can know if bella is in the nominative plural or in the accusative plural. So I have one more thing to talk about. I want you guys to understand that bella is in the nominative plural. However, you should not mistake this with a first declension noun. That's why it's really important to not only know your genitive singulars, your nouns, you need to know what declension that noun is. Because in the future, we will go through different declensions which have similar endings, but not the same, which can make it extremely confusing when you're looking at different cases. Now let's talk about a little bit of a deeper subject. Dea versus deus and philia versus filius. So based on what we have learned, in the dative and ablative plural, dea and philia would be deis and filiis, because that's how the first declension is declined. However, their forms are actually deabus and filiabus. Why are these the forms? It's there to distinguish between the counterparts deus and filius, because if we didn't have these irregular forms, we can actually be extremely easily confused if filiis refers to a daughter or a multiple group of daughters or a multiple group of sons. That's why we have irregular factors for deabus and filiabus for the feminine side. With that being said, thank you so much for going over this video and can't wait to see you in the next one.